We had the other night on the 29th postponed to tonight, Articles 11 and 12. We're now going to take them up in order. Number 11 first. The zoning bylaw amendment, keeping of hens. We have the proposed vote of the Arlington Redevelopment Board. Mr. Loretti is arising to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Loretti, Arlington Redevelopment Board. Mr. Moderator, as you know, Mr. O'Brien just handed you the original recommended vote of the Redevelopment Board. At our meeting of Monday, we also voted to make one very minor amendment to that vote, and the text of that amendment has not been distributed to town meeting members. So I'd like to start first by asking everyone here to take out their vote of the Redevelopment Board. It's page 9 of the report to town meeting, and I will tell them what that amendment is and then explain it in the course of my presentation.
Mr. Loretti did approach me last meeting and ask if this amendment would be okay to do in verbally. I told him it would, that he wouldn't need to distribute it to the meeting because it's such short and precise wording that we can all follow it, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Larry. Continue.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. The amendment itself reads submit the following motion to amend Article 11 by inserting the word existing immediately after the words at least 25 feet from. So if you look at the underlined text under the vote, it will now read at least 25 feet from existing residences. And similarly, in the table of use regulations under 8.23, it would read the same way, 25 feet from existing residences. And that is the only change in that amendment. Article 11 is the sole 10 registered voter zoning amendment this year. And as you can see, the intent of the article is to allow the keeping of hens within the town of Arlington. After the Redevelopment Board held its hearing on all the zoning articles, the first thing we did was to check with the building inspector, who is also the zoning enforcement officer, to see if we indeed did need to change the zoning bylaw to allow the keeping of hens. In a number of cities and towns in the Commonwealth, a small number of animals like this would be treated as pets and would not require any specific changes to the zoning bylaw. However, in Arlington, our zoning bylaw, like the enabling legislation in the state, gives quite a bit of deference to agricultural uses. You can put a farm virtually anywhere in this town. However, the use in the zoning bylaw that allows you to put farms in town also specifically prohibits the raising of poultry and livestock. And for that reason, you can't keep either fowl or cattle or other beasts in your backyard. And traditionally, that prohibition has been used to exclude or prohibit the raising of hens and other poultry. So following the hearing, the Redevelopment Board voted unanimously to allow the keeping of a small number of hens. And the vote is fairly similar to the language that was originally included in the warrant. However, the Redevelopment Board did add a number of additional restrictions to the original language, and I'd like to run through them with you. I'd ask you to take a look at the language of the vote and specifically the way it's presented in the table of use regulations as item 8.23. As in the warrant article, only the keeping of hens would be allowed, not roosters, and only up to 6. You could not do this as a business. It would have to be for your personal use, either as pets or for egg laying. And they would only be allowed in the rear yard of your property, not the front yard or the side yard. There would also be a setback requirement that the enclosure for the hens would have to be at least 6 feet from the property line, and the enclosure would have to be at least 25 feet from the nearest existing residence to your property. And we inserted that word existing to satisfy the concerns of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. Otherwise, there could be a question about what would happen if the other residents on the neighboring lots changed in shape. So that is the reason for that addition that I just mentioned. I'd like to clarify how this works in terms of permitting. I'm afraid we managed to confuse quite a few people on the other zoning articles, and I'd ask you to listen very carefully to this because it could be very confusing. The way the article is written right now, if you look in the table itself, there are 3 zoning districts in which hens would be permitted. There are the 2 single-family residential zoning districts and the 2-family residential zoning districts. Everywhere else in the table you'll see a blank. That means that hens would not be allowed there at all. There would be no special permit, there would be no variances because Arlington does not give variances for uses. So if you are in any other zoning district besides the R0, R1, and R2, you're out of luck. You would not be able to keep hens under this article. And as I said, there would be no special permitting or any permitting under the zoning bylaw. However, if your hen house was large enough, you would need a building permit for it, though that's unlikely. And you would definitely need a permit from the Board of Health because the way the use is written, it says that it only applies to hens that are permitted by the Arlington Board of Health. Now, at this time, the Board of Health does not give permits for the keeping of hens. But if they were to do so in the future and this article passed, then you indeed would be able to keep hens in town. So the effect of this article is that if it does not pass and in the future the Board of Health decides to institute a permitting program for the keeping of hens, if this article does not pass, you would still not be able to keep hens in town because of the existing prohibition in the zoning bylaw. If you tried to keep hens merely based on a permit from the Board of Health in that situation, the building inspector, as a zoning enforcement officer, is going to come after you or your chickens. So I hope that's clear. While there is no permitting requirement in this zoning bylaw from either the Zoning Board of Appeals or the Redevelopment Board, there is this requirement that in order for this use to be operable, you would need to have a permit from the Board of Health. So that concludes my
Thank you, Mr. Levy.
comments, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Ms. Callaway.